Family disrespect exposed. How one mother finally took control of her life, family conflict. In today's video, we dive into the emotional journey of a mother who has spent years sacrificing for her family, only to be met with family disrespect. She discovers the strength to stand up for herself and break free from toxic family dynamics. If you've ever faced family disrespect or felt overlooked, this video will resonate with you. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Stories TH for more stories about self-empowerment and healing. 2 days before Christmas, I woke up early, excited to prepare for the family gathering that was about to take place. I went straight to the farmer's market and carefully picked out the freshest produce I could find, placing everything in a large woven basket. My heart swelled with love as I thought of the holiday meal I was about to prepare for my daughter, Samantha. I knew she would be thrilled. Over the years, I had perfected her favorite dishes: lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The kitchen quickly filled with the delicious aroma of roasting garlic, thyme, and chicken. There was no better feeling than preparing a meal for someone you love, especially when you knew it would bring them comfort. As I set the table with a festive tablecloth, fluffed the pillows, and arranged the dishes, I could hardly contain my excitement. It felt like waiting for Santa Claus himself to arrive. Samantha had just finished her first full-time job after college. Despite all the excitement and fatigue from working until the last possible moment, she had insisted on finishing her tasks so she could leave a good impression on her boss. I always admired her drive and work ethic. It was about 7 p.m. when the front door finally opened, and I rushed to greet her, arms half raised for a hug. But instead, she rushed past me and went straight in her father David's arms, practically bouncing with joy. "Dad, I got a $5,000 bonus this year," she exclaimed. David's face lit up with pride as he patted her on the head. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you," he said. In that moment, I felt a small pang in my chest as the rest of the family, David's parents, Harold and Beverly, came over to shower Samantha with praise, praising her for being the pride of the family. I stood there, a little bit to the side, watching them swarm around her. Of course, I was happy for her. How could I not be? But there was a quiet ache that I couldn't shake. It felt as though I had been forgotten. Samantha was my daughter, the one I had raised, yet here she was lavishing attention on everyone else. I stepped forward, trying to push aside the feeling of being invisible. "Long day. Are you hungry?" I asked. "I made your favorites. I can heat them up for you." But before I could even get the words out fully, Samantha snapped, "Mom, can you stop asking all these pointless questions?" She sounded clearly annoyed. Then she crouched down, unzipped her suitcase, and proudly pulled out a stack of neatly wrapped envelopes, placing them on the coffee table like she was preparing to announce the winners of a game show. Jason, David's younger brother, and his wife Emily entered, immediately eyeing the envelopes. "Wow, Samantha, looks like you're doing great at your job," Jason said, impressed. "I'm guessing these are gifts for everyone. That's really thoughtful." But when Samantha saw Emily, she jumped up, squealing in excitement. "Auntie, I missed you so much." There they were, hugging each other as if they were the best of friends. Meanwhile, I stood there, frozen in place, feeling invisible, unimportant. Samantha handed out gifts one by one: $1,000 Visa gift cards for David, $300 spa vouchers for Harold and Beverly, $200 gourmet market card for Jason and his wife. But when she finally reached me, she paused, her face lighting up. "Oh my gosh, I almost forgot about you," she said playfully. She reached in her bag and, to my shock, pulled out a tiny envelope and slipped it into our little dog Coco's sweater, saying, "This one's for you, Coco, for being such a good girl this year." My smile froze in place. My hand, which had been outstretched, hung useless in the air. I felt a strange mixture of anger and disbelief. Samantha didn't just forget me, she deliberately dismissed me. "What about mine?" I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to me with a breezy, cold tone that cut right through me. "Mom, you're home all day. You don't work. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, sure, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" In that moment, something in me snapped. The tears I had been holding back for years finally broke free, and my heart broke all over again. I was no longer just a mother. I was nothing. Samantha had become a stranger to me, someone who only viewed me as a servant, someone to do the emotional labor while she took all the praise. David, Harold, and Beverly tried to play it off, acting as though I was overreacting. But for me, this was the moment I knew. I wasn't family. I was just a housekeeper who had no right to be included in their holiday plans. After a tense confrontation and broken plate, I stormed out of the house. For the first time in years, I left with nothing but my own thoughts and the painful realization that Samantha, the daughter I'd raised with everything I had cast me aside like an afterthought. I didn't even want to go home to my old life, where I felt like a shadow of myself. Instead, I turned to the one person who never failed me, my mother. When I called her, she offered me nothing but understanding. She didn't push me for answers or ask me to explain. Instead, she sent me a transfer of $20,000, telling me to go have the time of my life. For the first time in years, I had the courage to go out on my own terms. I booked a flight and went to Iceland, a country I had always dreamed of visiting. The cold air, the snow, and the northern lights felt like a dream come true. I felt free. Meanwhile, David and Samantha's attempts to guilt-trip me continued. They wanted to manipulate me back into submission, thinking I would return to them as I had so many times before. But I wasn't the woman who could be pushed around anymore. I knew my worth, and it wasn't tied to Samantha's approval. It wasn't tied to anyone's expectations but my own. A few months later, I returned home, and Samantha tried again to win me over, apologizing and asking for forgiveness. But I stood firm. This time I wasn't backing down. I had learned that self-respect and understanding my value meant more than anything. Samantha's apology was just another act, another manipulation. And as much as I longed to hear her say the words that would make everything right again, I realized that the only person who could make things right was me. This time, I was in control of my own life, and I was no longer afraid to choose myself. And as I looked at the life I had left behind, I knew for sure that I wasn't the person who needed to change. It was Samantha, the one who had lost touch with what it truly meant to love and respect others, that needed to wake up. I had been waiting for her to change, but now I knew it was time for me to live for myself. I stood tall in my new life, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly walking in the light. No longer a shadow, no longer invisible, I was free. 2 days before Christmas, I was up at dawn, eager to prepare a special holiday meal for my daughter, Samantha. I went to the farmer's market and filled a large woven basket with the freshest produce I could find, excited to cook her favorite dishes: lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The aroma of garlic, thyme, and roasting chicken filled the house, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. As I set the table, fluffed the pillows, and arranged everything perfectly, I felt the anticipation building inside me. I was ready for this family moment, a time of togetherness and joy. Samantha, having just completed her first full-time job out of college, had worked through the final day before Christmas to leave a good impression on her boss, something I always admired in her. When she walked through the door, my heart leaped with joy, but it quickly turned to something else. As I rushed to greet her with a smile and open arms, she brushed past me without even acknowledging my presence. She went straight into her father David's arms, exclaiming that she had received a $5,000 bonus at work. David beamed with pride, while I stood at the edge, feeling forgotten. Harold and Beverly, David's parents, joined in, showering her with praise. I stood silently, my joy fading into a quiet ache. I had raised Samantha, but in that moment, I felt invisible. She didn't seem to see me, didn't even recognize all I had done for her. My mind raced, but I pushed the thoughts aside and tried to stay positive. Finally, after some time, I stepped forward and took her hand, offering her the food I had so carefully prepared. "Are you hungry? I made your favorites," I asked, trying to engage. But the response I received was anything but warm. Samantha snapped at me, annoyed by what she deemed to be unnecessary questions. She didn't even look me in the eye. Then, She revealed that she had brought gifts for everyone, generous and thoughtful presents, with $1,000 Visa gift card for David, spa vouchers for Harold and Beverly, and gourmet market cards for her uncles. As she handed them out, my heart sank. She didn't have a gift for me. At that moment, I realized something bitter Samantha had completely forgotten about me. My hand, which had been reaching out, hung in the air as she placed the last envelope into Coco's sweater. I couldn't hide my shock and disappointment. "What about mine?" I asked quietly. Her response, cold and cutting, stunned me. "Mom, you don't work. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You just stay home, cook, and clean. I didn't ask for anything from you, so why should I give you a gift?" Her words stung like a slap to the face. For the first time, I realized that Samantha, the daughter I had sacrificed so much for, saw me as nothing more than a maid, someone to clean, cook, and take care of everything without ever asking for anything in return. The weight of the years I had spent sacrificing my own dreams to care for her hit me all at once. I stood there, shocked, as she turned back to her excitement about her trip to Hawaii, booking flights for the whole family, but conveniently leaving me out of the plans. She had no interest in me, only in what I could offer. Her words cut deeper than the initial shock. She had turned into someone I barely recognized. How could she be so selfish and dismissive of the person who had given everything for her? The rage that had been building inside me exploded in an instant. I grabbed a plate of cookies I had baked, feeling the intensity of the moment, and hurled it to the floor. The shattering sound echoed in the room like a fire alarm. Beverly was the first to react, her voice sharp, accusing me of ruining the night. David joined in, telling me to leave if I couldn't handle the situation. He had no idea what I had been through, what I had endured for so many years. Samantha simply sat back, indifferent to my pain. Her eyes were cold as she watched me. She didn't care. She wasn't the daughter I once held in my arms, full of love and gratitude. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't let them see me broken like this. I stormed out of the house and went straight to my mother's place. My mother had always been the one person who understood me without judgment. When I called her and told her I was leaving, she didn't question me. She offered me nothing but unconditional support. Her gentle words were a balm to my aching soul, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. She transferred $20,000 into my account, telling me to go have the time of my life. It wasn't just the money, it was the validation I had been missing for so long. I booked a flight to Iceland to escape everything, to take back control of my life. As the days went by, David and Samantha continued to try and guilt-trip me into returning, but I stood firm. I didn't respond to their calls or messages. I was done being emotionally manipulated. I had always been there for them, but now it was time for me to choose myself. I was no longer their servant, their doormat. I was free. When I returned home after my travels, Samantha tried to play the part of the remorseful daughter. She apologized for her behavior, but I knew it was just another act. I wasn't falling for it. She hadn't changed. She didn't understand what it meant to truly love and appreciate someone. I had spent years trying to make her see me, but it was clear now I had to walk away from the relationship as it was. I was no longer willing to accept the scraps of affection they tossed my way. I was done with being invisible. It wasn't until I was sitting in the courtroom, watching Samantha's legal team try to manipulate the situation to their advantage, that I realized how far I had come. I had fought for myself, for my peace, and for my worth. I wasn't the woman who would stay silent anymore. I was finally free from the emotional chains that had kept me bound for so long. I knew what I needed, and it wasn't the approval of a daughter who couldn't see me for who I truly was. The day I walked out of that courtroom, I wasn't defeated. I was empowered. I had made the hardest decision of my life, but it was the right one. I had finally chosen myself, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. Just 2 days before Christmas, I woke up early with a determined sense of purpose. I went straight to the farmer's market, carefully picking out the freshest produce, filling up a big woven basket. As I made my way back home, I was excited to start cooking Samantha's favorite dishes: lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The house was soon filled with the warm, mouth-watering aroma of roasting garlic and thyme. As I laid out the tablecloth, fluffed the pillows, and prepared everything for the family gathering, I felt that familiar rush of anticipation, the kind that comes before a cherished moment with loved ones. Samantha, who had just completed her first full-time job after college, had worked through the final day of the year, eager to make a good impression on her boss. I had always known she was a hard-working young woman, and I was incredibly proud of her. When she finally came through the door that evening, it was after 7 p.m. I rushed to greet her, arms open for a hug, but she didn't even glance my way. She went straight to her father, David, almost bouncing with excitement as she told him about the $5,000 bonus she had received from her job. David lit up with pride, his face beaming as he patted her on the head, saying, "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." My heart, however, began to sink as I stood off to the side, watching them. It felt as though I had been forgotten, dismissed. Harold and Beverly, David's parents, came in, their faces glowing with pride as they crowded around Samantha, showering her with admiration. There was no mention of me. It was as if I had no place in this celebration of her success, even though I was the one who had raised her, nurtured her, and put my whole life into being her mother. After a moment, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Long day. Are you hungry?" "I made your favorites," I said with a forced smile, trying to be warm and welcoming. But her response hit like a slap to the face. Samantha snapped at me, visibly annoyed. "Mom, can you not ask all these pointless little questions?" Her words were harsh and dismissive. She didn't even look at me as she dropped her suitcase onto the floor and began pulling out gifts that she had neatly wrapped, gifts for everyone else in the room. David, Harold, and Beverly were all given thoughtful presents, gift cards, vouchers, and tokens of appreciation. But I stood there, frozen, heart sinking further. I wasn't even worth a gift. Samantha turned to Coco, our dog, and slipped the last envelope into her sweater, as if that was the only attention I was worthy of. I managed to swallow the pain and asked quietly, "What about mine?" I had hoped, in some small part of my heart, that she had saved mine for last, maybe something special. But when she turned to me, her voice was cutting. "Mom, you're home all day. You don't work. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" My heart shattered in that moment. The years of love, sacrifice, and hard work I had given her seemed to mean nothing. I had given up my own career to be there for her, to nurture her, and this was how I was repaid. As the evening wore on, Samantha continued to bask in the glow of her success, while I stood at the periphery, invisible. I tried to hold on to the hope that this was just a misstep, a misunderstanding. Maybe she was stressed, overwhelmed by the holidays and her career. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. It was a pattern I had seen for years. I was the one who had always been there, the one who had quietly kept the house running, while David and Samantha got lost in their own lives. Samantha had become so self-absorbed, so wrapped up in her world, that she couldn't even see the woman who had raised her, who had sacrificed everything for her. When I finally snapped, throwing the plate of cookies to the floor, I didn't just break a dish, I broke something inside myself. David and Beverly were furious, accusing me of ruining the night. I didn't care. In that moment, I realized I wasn't the one ruining anything. I was the one who had been treated like an afterthought for far too long. And as I stormed out, leaving the house behind, I knew it was the last time I would ever beg for recognition from a daughter who couldn't even see me. I went to my mother's house, seeking refuge. She didn't ask questions, just offered her unconditional support, the kind of support that had been absent for so long from my own family. She transferred $20,000 into my account, telling me to go and take care of myself. For the first time in years, I felt like I had permission to live my own life, to choose myself. I flew to Iceland, seeking the peace I had long been denied. Back home, David and Samantha tried to manipulate me, calling and texting, trying to guilt-trip me into returning. But I was done. I didn't respond. When I finally did return home, Samantha tried to apologize, but I could see right through it. Her apology was empty, just a tactic to get me to come back. I wasn't fooled. The woman I had raised was gone. replaced by someone who only saw me as a source of convenience. The final straw came when Samantha tried to manipulate me again, using my money as a bargaining chip. I had finally realized what I meant to them. It wasn't about love or family, it was about control. I had always been the caretaker, the one who put everyone else's needs above my own. But no more. I was done. That day, I walked into the courthouse, ready to finalize the divorce. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done with being emotionally blackmailed, done with being treated as nothing more than a tool for someone else's gain. And when I left that courtroom, I wasn't defeated, I was empowered. I was free. Free from the family that had taken everything from me and never once asked what I needed in return. Now, I've chosen to live for myself. I've started volunteering at the local library, doing something that makes me feel fulfilled. I've stopped waiting for Samantha to come around. She will have to live with the consequences of her actions. I'm no longer the woman who stayed in the background. I'm the woman who chose herself, and I've never been prouder of that decision. A few days before Christmas, I woke up early, eager to get started on preparing a meal for my daughter, Samantha. I went to the farmer's market, carefully selecting the freshest produce, and returned home to start cooking her favorite dishes: lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The house filled with the rich, warm aroma of garlic roasting in the oven, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of joy as I arranged the table, eager to share a peaceful holiday meal together. Samantha, having just completed her first full-time job after college, had insisted on working until the very last day, wanting to make a strong impression on her boss. I understood her dedication, but I also hoped she would recognize the importance of family, especially around the holidays. By the time Samantha finally walked through the door, it was just past 7 p.m. I stood up quickly, a big smile on my face, my arms instinctively open for a hug. But Samantha didn't even glance at me. She walked straight past me, almost ignoring my presence entirely, and went directly to her father, David, practically bouncing with excitement as she announced that she had received a $5,000 bonus at work. David was thrilled, his face lighting up with pride as he patted her on the head. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." Meanwhile, I stood silently off to the side, feeling invisible. Her grandparents, Harold and Beverly, quickly followed suit, showering her with praise. The whole family, it seemed, was revolving around Samantha and her success. I felt an ache in my heart as I stood there. I had raised Samantha, she was my child, and yet here I was, overlooked in favor of everyone else. I took a deep breath and walked toward Samantha, trying to keep the disappointment in my voice at bay. "Long day. Are you hungry? I made your favorite dishes," I said, offering her some comfort food. But the response I got was not the one I had hoped for. Samantha looked at me briefly, then snapped, "Mom, can you not ask all these pointless little questions?" Her tone was sharp, filled with irritation. She had barely even looked me in the eyes before she crouched down to unzip her suitcase. As I stood there, my hands still outstretched, she beamed proudly, pulling out neatly wrapped gifts and arranging them on the coffee table. It was a moment that should have been filled with warmth, but instead, it only amplified the distance I now felt from my daughter. One by one, Samantha handed out gifts to David, Harold, and Beverly, each one seemingly more thoughtful than the last. My heart sank a little more with each gift. Then, finally, Samantha turned to me and said, "Oh, I almost forgot. This one's for you, Coco," slipping an envelope into our dog's sweater. Coco, our little dog, was receiving a gift, but I wasn't. I felt the sting of being invisible once again. Slowly, I asked, "What about mine?" Her response was cold and dismissive. "Mom, you don't work, you're home all day. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" Her words felt like a slap in the face. I had given up my career, put everything aside for her, and this was how she saw me. A housewife, a servant, useless. The rest of the evening passed in a blur as I quietly watched Samantha enjoy the spotlight, handing out gifts, laughing with David, and chatting with everyone around her. I was standing on the sidelines, feeling more alone than I had ever felt. And then the situation only got worse when Samantha turned to me and casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, I booked a trip to Hawaii for the entire family. We're leaving tomorrow night, and you can stay here to watch Coco." My heart broke in that moment. I wasn't even worthy of going on a family vacation, let alone receiving a gift. I was just the caretaker, the one who took care of everyone else, but was always left out. My daughter didn't care about me. I wasn't even important enough to make it on the trip. Finally, I snapped. The hurt and frustration I had been swallowing for years finally boiled over. In a burst of anger, I threw the plate of cookies I had carefully baked to the floor, the sound of the breaking dish echoing through the house. David, Harold, and Beverly reacted with shock, chastising me for ruining the evening. I didn't care. In that moment, I knew I had to stop pretending. I wasn't just the mother in the background. I wasn't the unpaid servant. I was a person too, with feelings and worth. Samantha, who I had sacrificed so much for, had lost sight of that. In the midst of their anger, I made the decision to leave. I grabbed my bag, packed some clothes, and walked out the door. As I stood on the sidewalk, I called my mom. "Mom, I'm not coming home for the holidays," I said, my voice steady but hollow. She didn't question me, didn't ask for details. She simply supported me, quietly, as she always did. I let out a sigh of relief. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to stay in a family that didn't respect me. I didn't need to beg for love or recognition. I spent the next few days alone, taking a break from the chaos. My mom, in her quiet wisdom, transferred $20,000 into my account, telling me to take care of myself. For once, I could finally do something for me. I left for Iceland, choosing to escape from the situation and finally give myself the peace I had always been denied. When I returned, Samantha tried to apologize, but I wasn't fooled. The apology was nothing more than a manipulation to get me back into her control. This time I stood firm. I wasn't going back. It wasn't just about a gift. It wasn't about a trip to Hawaii. It was about the years of emotional manipulation, the years of being treated like I didn't matter, and the years of giving without ever receiving anything in return. And as I sat there, ready to move on with my life, I realized something important. Samantha may have been my daughter, but it was time for me to stop pretending. I had spent so many years catering to her needs, but it was clear she didn't care about me. In the end, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of love is to choose yourself. I may have given my all to Samantha, but now I was taking back my life. I wasn't going to be her emotional punching bag any longer. This time, I was standing up for myself. As Christmas approached, I found myself preparing a special meal for Samantha, my daughter. I woke up early, full of excitement and love, and headed straight to the farmer's market, determined to bring home the freshest produce for her favorite dishes: lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The house filled with the warmth of the garlic and thyme roasting in the oven, the scent comforting like a long-awaited embrace. I laid the tablecloth carefully, fluffed the pillows, and sat on the couch, like a child eagerly waiting for Santa to arrive. Samantha had just completed her first full-time job after college, and I knew how much she had poured into her work, even insisting on working right up until the last day to impress her boss. While I admired her work ethic, I couldn't help but feel that Christmas should be a time for family to come together, not just about work and achievements. It was just past 7 p.m. when the front door finally opened. I jumped to my feet, smiling wide and raising my arms for a hug, but to my surprise, Samantha didn't even glance in my direction. Instead, she rushed past me into David's arms, practically glowing with excitement as she proudly announced she'd received a $5,000 bonus at work. David beamed with pride, patting her gently on the head. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." And then Harold and Beverly, my in-laws, came bustling over, their faces alight with admiration for Samantha. "You're the pride of this family, Samantha," Beverly exclaimed. I stood quietly off to the side, watching as everyone gathered around her. My heart felt a pang of disappointment and loneliness. Here I was, the one who had raised her, but in this moment, I seemed to fade into the background. I took a deep breath, trying to hide my hurt. I stepped forward, smiling as warmly as I could, and reached for Samantha's hand. Long day. Are you hungry? I made your favorite dishes, I said, offering a small gesture of care. But instead of the warmth I was hoping for, Samantha responded sharply, Mom, can you stop with all these pointless little questions? Her voice was dismissive, almost angry. It felt like a slap in the face. Samantha continued her task of pulling neatly wrapped envelopes out of her suitcase, placing them proudly on the coffee table. The way she presented them felt so ceremonious, and I realized in that moment she wasn't just giving gifts. She was showing off. It wasn't long before Samantha had handed out gifts to everyone. David got a $1,000 Visa gift card, Harold and Beverly received spa vouchers, and the uncles got gourmet market gift cards. I stood there, numb, watching them accept their presents with smiles and gratitude. Finally, Samantha looked up and, with a dismissive glance, handed me the final envelope. To my shock, she placed it inside Coco's sweater and cooed, "This one's for you, Coco, for being such a good girl this year." I stood there, frozen. My smile faltered and my hand dropped. Samantha hadn't remembered me. She hadn't given me a gift, not even a token of appreciation for the years of sacrifice, love, and care. I felt invisible. Slowly, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "What about mine?" Samantha turned to me with a flippant tone. "Mom, you don't work. You're home all day. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" The words sliced through me like a cold knife. The years of being a full-time mom, putting my life on hold for her, meant nothing. I was a housewife, nothing more. The evening that followed felt like an endless blur. I watched as Samantha reveled in the attention, soaking up the praise and handing out gifts with ease. Meanwhile, I was barely acknowledged, as if I had become a ghost in my own home. The harshness of her words still echoed in my mind. Why would I get you a gift? You don't work, you don't contribute. As I stood there, the anger and hurt started to build. This wasn't just about the gift. It was about everything, how she had come to see me as nothing more than a servant, someone who was there to cook, clean, and cater to everyone's needs without ever asking for anything in return. This was about how, after everything I had done, I was nothing to her. The moment Samantha announced that she had booked a trip to Hawaii for the entire family, I thought maybe this would be her way of showing she cared. At least we'd be together, I thought. But when Samantha casually said, "You're staying here to watch Coco," it hit me. I wasn't even worthy of a seat on that plane. I was just the one who stayed behind to take care of things, to make sure the dog was fed and the house was still in order. Samantha's voice, cold and commanding, only added to the weight of it. It was like she was giving orders, as if I didn't even have a say in my own life. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but the pain was too much. In a sudden burst of frustration, I threw the plate of cookies I had baked earlier onto the floor. The sound of the shattering plate filled the room, and for a brief moment, it felt as though I had shattered something much bigger than just a dish. It was my sense of self, my dignity. David, Harold, and Beverly were shocked, but the reaction from Samantha was the one that truly broke me. Her response was not concern, but annoyance. She scolded me for ruining the evening, as if I were the one who had broken something that could never be fixed. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I had been patient for so long, silently accepting my role as the one who never mattered. But that night, I made the decision to leave. I grabbed a bag, packed a few clothes, and walked out. It wasn't just about the trip. It wasn't about the lack of a gift. It was about the years of feeling invisible, unappreciated, and used. I left because for the first time, I realized I deserved more than this. I called my mom, who quietly supported me, and went to a hotel to find some peace. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to cater to everyone else's needs. As I spent those days alone, I began to see the truth. I wasn't just the mother who had been left behind. I was a person in my own right, with my own needs and desires. I didn't need Samantha to validate me. I didn't need David or anyone else to tell me I was important. I had been giving for so long, but it was time to take back my life. And that's exactly what I did. The path ahead wasn't easy, but for the first time, I was living it on my own terms. This was the turning point. The day I walked out of that marriage, I finally walked toward freedom. I didn't need anyone's approval. I needed to honor myself, to live for myself. And for the first time in years, I knew I had done the right thing. Samantha might never understand, but I had given her the greatest gift of all my freedom. As Christmas neared, I woke up early, full of excitement and anticipation for Samantha's visit. She had just finished her first full-time job after college, and I had spent the morning preparing her favorite meal: lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The house smelled of roasting garlic and thyme, filling me with warmth. I laid out the tablecloth, fluffed the pillows, and sat on the couch, waiting for Samantha to arrive. My heart was full as I thought about all the years I had dedicated to her, raising her with love, sacrifice, and unwavering support. Samantha had always been a hard worker, and I had hoped that Christmas would be a time to connect, to share some love and gratitude for all she had achieved. But as soon as she walked through the door, I realized how much I had miscalculated. At 7 p.m., the door finally opened. I jumped to my feet, arms raised for a hug, ready to share the love and joy of the season. But Samantha didn't even glance at me. Instead, she practically ran past me and into David's arms, proudly announcing that she had received a $5,000 bonus at work. David lit up like a Christmas tree, filled with pride as he patted Samantha on the head and praised her. Then Harold and Beverly, my in-laws, arrived, showering her with admiration. They all surrounded her, congratulating her on her success. I stood silently on the sidelines, a smile frozen on my face, but a growing ache in my chest. I had been waiting for this moment, this connection, but all I felt was ignored, sidelined, and forgotten. Samantha barely spared me a second glance. I couldn't help but feel the sting of exclusion. I stepped forward, tried to offer a small, warm gesture, asking if she was hungry and if she would like me to heat up the meal I had prepared. But the response I received was a cold, sharp reply. "Mom, can you stop with these pointless little questions?" she snapped. My heart sank as the words hit me. I had spent so much time nurturing and supporting her, but it seemed like none of it mattered. She wasn't even looking at me as she laid out the stack of neatly wrapped envelopes she had brought, as if her gift-giving was an act of superiority, a way of showing off her success. My hurt deepened when Samantha handed out gifts to everyone. David received a $1,000 Visa gift card. Harold and Beverly got spa vouchers, and the uncles received gourmet market cards. I stood there, motionless, barely able to hide the pain. It wasn't about the gifts, it was about the thought behind them. She hadn't even considered me. My heart broke when she slid the final envelope into Coco's sweater, proclaiming, "This one's for you, Coco, for being such a good girl this year." As I stood there, my hand outstretched, waiting for a token of appreciation, the reality hit me. Samantha had completely forgotten about me. She didn't even see me as worth a gift, a simple acknowledgement of my love and sacrifice. I tried to mask my pain, but Samantha's dismissive words echoed in my head. "Mom, you don't work. You're home all day. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" My whole life, I had worked behind the scenes, giving everything I had to support her, to be there for her when she needed me. And yet, here I was invisible, treated like a mere servant. My heart shattered as the realization sank and I was nothing to her, just a figure in the background, a role that had no value in her life anymore. The evening dragged on, filled with tension and unspoken words. Samantha continued to bask in the attention of David, Harold, and Beverly, oblivious to the storm inside me. When she announced that she had booked a trip to Hawaii for everyone, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was showing that she cared. But then, with a wave of her hand, she casually dismissed me, saying, "You stay here. Watch Coco." My heart sank even lower. I wasn't even worth a spot on the family trip. I was the one left behind, tasked with looking after the dog, as if that was all I was good for. Samantha didn't even look at me when she said it, as if I had no other role in her life but to be at her service. That was the moment it all broke. The weight of years of sacrifice, love, and invisible service became unbearable. I had given everything for her, but I had nothing left in return. I snapped. I grabbed the plate of cookies I had baked for the occasion and threw it against the floor, the sound of shattering porcelain filling the room. The shock on David, Harold, and Beverly's faces was nothing compared to the raw, painful realization that Samantha wasn't bothered by any of it. She didn't care. She had grown up, and with that, she had become someone unrecognizable to me. David scolded me for ruining the night, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to apologize for feeling hurt, for finally standing up for myself. I stormed out of the house, grabbing my bag and leaving everything behind. The years of silent sacrifice had finally taken their toll. I called my mom, who, without hesitation, offered me the space and understanding I needed. She didn't ask questions. She simply supported me. I knew then that I had to start living for myself. Not for Samantha, not for anyone else. I checked into a hotel, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. As the days passed, I began to understand something important. Samantha's actions had nothing to do with me. They were about her. The hurtful words she said, the dismissive tone, it wasn't about me. It was about her inability to see the value in anything that wasn't immediately useful to her. It wasn't until I was on my own that I realized how much I had lost myself in trying to be everything for everyone else. I had been lost in the roles of mother, wife, and caretaker, but I wasn't just those things. I was Amanda, a person with her own life, her own needs, and her own worth. Finally, I could breathe, without the weight of expectations or the burden of being invisible. I was free to be who I was, without apology, without regret. And as Samantha came to realize the consequences of her actions, I stayed steady in my decision to no longer accept being treated as anything less than worthy. 2 days before Christmas, I woke up early, eager to begin preparing a special meal for Samantha, who had just wrapped up her first full-time job after college. I had always been proud of her work ethic, and I couldn't wait to see her. I headed straight to the farmer's market, where I filled a big woven basket with the freshest produce I could find. Returning home, I began cooking Samantha's favorite meal, lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The house soon filled with the comforting aromas of roasting garlic and thyme. As I set the table and fluffed the pillows, my heart swelled with anticipation. It was a moment I'd been waiting for, one of those rare times when I felt I could truly connect with my daughter. However, as soon as Samantha walked through the door that evening, it became clear that my hopes were misplaced. I eagerly jumped to my feet, arms open, ready to embrace her with all the love I had. But instead of rushing to me, she made a beeline straight for David, practically bouncing in excitement as she proudly announced her $5,000 bonus. David beamed with pride, patting her gently on the head and saying, "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." Soon after, my in-laws, Harold and Beverly, arrived and showered Samantha with more praise. It was a moment of celebration, but I felt invisible. My heart began to ache as I watched her receive all the attention from everyone else, while I stood there, seemingly forgotten. After everything I had done for her, raising her with nothing but love and sacrifice, it hurt deeply to see that all my efforts had gone unnoticed. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, trying to offer a kind gesture. "Long day. Are you hungry?" I asked, offering to heat up the meal I had made just for her. But instead of the warmth I hoped for, I was met with a sharp response. "Mom, can you stop asking all these pointless questions?" My stomach sank, and the sting of rejection hit me hard. She didn't even look at me as she set out a stack of neatly wrapped envelopes, clearly eager to share the gift she had prepared for everyone. It was as though I wasn't even in the room. As she handed out the gifts, David receiving a $1,000 Visa gift card, Harold and Beverly getting spa vouchers, and even the uncles receiving gourmet market cards, I stood there frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The pain was so sharp and overwhelming, I didn't know what to do with myself. Finally, Samantha reached in her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "All right, I almost forgot," she said, as though she had just remembered I existed. She handed the envelope to Coco, the family dog, sliding it into Coco's sweater. "This one's for you, Coco, for being such a good girl this year." I stood there, my hand still extended, hoping foolishly that Samantha would remember me. But she didn't. She didn't even look at me. In that moment, something in me broke. Samantha had not only ignored me, but she had also dismissed everything I had done for her. I tried to mask the pain, but her words cut deep. "Mom, you don't work. You're home all day. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" I had given my entire life to raising her, sacrificing everything to be the mother she needed. Yet all that love, all that dedication, meant nothing to her. In her eyes, I was just the background noise, the one who took care of everything without any recognition or thanks. The evening went on, with everyone else fawning over Samantha and me standing on the periphery, watching it all unfold. It wasn't the gifts that hurt. It was the total disregard for everything I had given her. Samantha even announced that she had booked a family trip to Hawaii for the holidays. I was left behind, told to stay home and watch Coco. I wasn't even worth a seat on the plane. In that moment, all the years I'd spent being her mother, her caretaker, and her support meant nothing. I was invisible. That was the breaking point. The years of sacrifice, of being there for her through everything, finally took their toll. I had never been treated with such indifference in my life. I snapped. In a moment of raw emotion, I grabbed the plate of cookies I had baked and threw it across the room, the sound of it shattering, echoing in my ears. Everyone in the room froze. David scolded me, his voice sharp, accusing me of ruining the night, while Harold and Beverly looked at me with disapproval. But all I could feel was the pain of being disregarded for so long. I wasn't going to apologize for it. I wasn't going to pretend like everything was okay when it wasn't. I stormed out of the house, grabbing my things and leaving. I called my mom, who, without hesitation, offered her support. She didn't ask questions. She just understood. She offered me the space I needed to figure things out. I checked into a hotel, and for the first time in years, I felt some semblance of peace. I realized that I had spent so much of my life living for everyone else, trying to meet their expectations, and in doing so, I had forgotten who I was. The days passed, and I realized I didn't need Samantha or David to validate me. I was my own person, with my own worth. I didn't need to be treated like I was invisible just to be loved. I learned to stand up for myself, to stop letting others define my value. When Samantha reached out, trying to guilt me into coming back, I stood firm. I was finally free from the expectations that had weighed me down for so long. I wasn't going to let anyone control me anymore. I was done with the manipulation and the emotional extortion. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to lose it again. As I sat in the hotel, sipping my coffee, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was living for me. I was no longer the person hiding in the background, hoping for someone to notice me. I was the woman who walked out and chose herself. Samantha would have to figure out her own path, just as I was now figuring out mine. It was time to stop being invisible and start living. The days leading up to Christmas were supposed to be a time of warmth and celebration, especially for Maggie, who had spent years putting everything aside to raise her daughter, Samantha, with unconditional love and support. But this year, things felt different. Maggie had spent the morning preparing Samantha's favorite meal, her pride shining through as she cooked lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes, filling the house with the rich aroma of roasting garlic and thyme. Every inch of the house had been prepared with care, from the tablecloth laid out perfectly to the cushions fluffed with anticipation. But there was a weight in Maggie's chest, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, Samantha would notice all the effort. Maggie had always been there for Samantha, sacrificing her own career and dreams to raise her, and yet she could never shake the feeling of being overlooked. Samantha, now freshly graduated and working her first full-time job after college, was about to arrive, and Maggie could feel the excitement bubble up as she waited for the door to open. But when Samantha finally walked through the door, the scene that unfolded shattered any illusions Maggie had about the warmth of family. Samantha didn't rush to greet her mother with a hug or even acknowledge her presence. Instead, she went straight to her father, David, practically jumping into his arms and proudly announcing the $5,000 bonus she had received from her work. The moment was filled with pride, But Maggie felt invisible, as though she were just a background figure in a family celebration that didn't include her. David lit up like a Christmas tree at Samantha's words, patting her on the head with adoration. Maggie stood there, watching, her heart sinking. And then Harold and Beverly, David's parents, entered the room, beaming with pride for Samantha, showering her with praise. Maggie stayed silent, stepping to the side as they fawned over Samantha like she was the only person in the room. Despite Maggie's joy for Samantha's success, a quiet ache settled in her heart. She was the one who had been there for Samantha every step of the way, and yet she was nothing more than an afterthought. Feeling the sting, Maggie tried to offer a kind gesture, asking if Samantha was hungry and offering to reheat the meal she had made. But Samantha barely even glanced at her, snapping, "Mom, can you not ask all these pointless little questions?" Maggie felt her chest tighten as her daughter turned away without even sparing her a second glance. Samantha pulled out a stack of neatly wrapped envelopes and proudly displayed them for everyone, eager to share the gifts she had prepared. Maggie tried to hold on to the hope that maybe Samantha had saved hers for last, that there was something special for her. But as Samantha handed out gifts to David, Harold, and Beverly, she didn't even mention Maggie. When Samantha finally remembered, it wasn't a heartfelt gift, but rather a small envelope for the family dog, Coco. "This one's for you, Coco, for being such a good girl," she said, slipping it into Coco's sweater. The room was silent as Maggie stood frozen, her hands still extended, waiting for anything from her daughter. The moment Samantha snapped, "Mom, you don't work. You don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, sure, but that's your choice." Maggie felt the foundation of her love for Samantha crumble. Her entire life had been spent sacrificing for Samantha, giving up her own career to support her, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of every need, yet none of that was appreciated. In Samantha's eyes, she was simply a maid, someone to serve, not a mother to cherish. The disappointment hit Maggie like a ton of bricks, and she found herself standing on the periphery of her own family, invisible and unimportant. The night continued, and Samantha moved through it as if everything was fine, while Maggie remained in the background, quiet and numb. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the plate of cookies she had made and threw it across the room, the sound of it shattering sharp in the stillness of the room. David and Beverly immediately jumped up, scolding her, accusing her of ruining the evening. Maggie didn't care anymore. The years of quiet sacrifice and being unnoticed had finally taken their toll. Samantha had ignored her, dismissed her, and treated her as if she were nothing. Maggie was done trying to please people who didn't even care. She stormed out, leaving behind the family who had never truly seen her. On her way out, Maggie called her mother, who without hesitation offered her the support and understanding she so desperately needed. It was a relief to hear her mother's voice, steady and comforting, without judgment. Maggie checked into a hotel that night. The first time in years she had a space that was truly her own, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. She realized that she had spent too many years living for others, trying to fulfill expectations that didn't honor her. Maggie was done being the invisible woman in the background. As she began to put the pieces of her life back together, Maggie found the courage to stand up for herself. She was no longer the mother who gave and gave, only to be taken for granted. She was the woman who chose to live for herself, who realized that her happiness didn't depend on the approval or validation of others. When Samantha reached out, tried to manipulate her back into submission, Maggie refused to cave. She stood firm, realizing that she deserved to be treated with respect, not just used as a tool to fulfill other people's needs. Samantha's manipulation tactics no longer had any power over her. In the end, Maggie walked away from the toxic relationship with Samantha and David, choosing a life of independence and self-respect. She didn't need their approval to be happy. She was finally free to live life on her own terms, and that was worth more than anything else. Maggie understood that sometimes, in order to move forward, you have to stop looking back and let go of the people who never truly valued you. Her journey was just beginning, and for the first time in a long time, she was ready to live it for herself. Maggie had always been the one to give every day, every year. From the moment Samantha was born, she dedicated her life to her daughter, setting aside her own dreams to ensure Samantha had everything she needed to succeed. Maggie didn't just raise her. She poured herself into Samantha, sacrificing her career, her time, and her personal well-being to build a life for Samantha that would help her thrive. And yet, at this pivotal moment in their lives, just before Christmas, Maggie felt herself fading into the background of her own family, unseen and unappreciated. The holiday was meant to be a time for togetherness, warmth, and love, and Maggie had spent the entire day preparing for it. She woke up early, excited to cook Samantha's favorite meal, lemon herb roasted chicken with creamy mashed potatoes. The entire house smelled like the comforting, rich aroma of roasted garlic and thyme, and Maggie couldn't wait for Samantha to come home and enjoy the meal that had been made with so much love. She set the table, fluffed the pillows, and waited eagerly for Samantha's return. The air was filled with anticipation, but beneath that excitement was a quiet ache in Maggie's heart. Samantha had just finished her first full-time job after college and was working late into the evening, but Maggie couldn't help but hope her daughter would come home and notice the effort she'd put into making the evening special. When Samantha finally arrived, Maggie's hope quickly dissolved. Samantha didn't rush to greet her mother with a warm embrace. Instead, she immediately rushed into her father David's arms, proudly announcing that she had received a $5,000 bonus at work. Maggie stood by, feeling the sting of rejection as David beamed with pride at Samantha's success. The praise from David, as well as from his parents, Harold and Beverly, flowed freely, while Maggie remained in the background, feeling invisible. She had raised Samantha with so much care, and yet now, in this moment, it felt as though all of that had been forgotten. Trying to remain composed, Maggie stepped forward, offering to reheat the meal she had made, but Samantha barely acknowledged her. Instead, she became fixated on the pile of gifts she had brought for everyone, gifts for David, Harold, and Beverly, but nothing for Maggie. Maggie could feel the weight of the moment as Samantha handed out the gifts one by one, with no mention of Maggie at all. Finally, Samantha remembered, and she handed Maggie an envelope for the dog. The last envelope was for Coco, the family pet, and Maggie felt the sting of betrayal deep in her chest. When she asked, "What about mine?" Samantha responded with a cruel dismissal. She told Maggie, "Mom, you don't work. You cook and clean, sure, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" The words hit like a punch to the gut. Maggie had always been there for Samantha, pouring her love into her every day, making every sacrifice for her daughter's well-being. And yet, Samantha had turned those sacrifices into something worthless in her eyes. Maggie had spent years ensuring Samantha had everything she needed, but all Samantha saw was a mother who didn't earn a paycheck, someone who was invisible in the eyes of the world. Maggie stood there, stunned and heartbroken, as Samantha continued to dismiss her, treating her like a mere servant in the house, not a mother deserving of love and respect. The evening continued, with Samantha's pride in her own success on full display while Maggie stood by, silenced by the painful realization that she had been forgotten. When Maggie finally exploded in frustration, throwing the plate of cookies across the room in a fit of anger, the entire family turned on her. David and Beverly immediately began scolding her, accusing her of ruining the night. Maggie didn't care anymore. She had reached her breaking point. She was done being invisible, done sacrificing her life for a family that couldn't even see her for who she was. She stormed out of the house, leaving behind the family who had only ever seen her as a caretaker, never as a person with needs of her own. In the quiet solitude of a hotel room that night, Maggie began to realize something that had been gnawing at her for years. She had been living her life for everyone else. She had put aside her own dreams and needs for Samantha and David, but it had never been enough. Samantha's rejection, combined with David's indifference, had finally shattered the illusion that her sacrifices were appreciated. For the first time in years, Maggie realized that she didn't have to live her life for anyone but herself. Maggie took a step toward her own freedom. She reached out to her mother, the one person who had always supported her without judgment, and she began to make the changes she had been too afraid to make. Maggie finally understood that she didn't need anyone's permission to live her life. She didn't need Samantha's approval or David's validation. She was done being the invisible woman behind the scenes. She was ready to be seen, to live her life on her own terms. And she wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Samantha, make her feel like she wasn't worthy of love and respect. In the days that followed, Maggie walked away from the toxic relationships that had kept her small for so long. She chose to embrace her independence, to rediscover the person she had once been before she had been consumed by her role as a mother and wife. She found new strength in herself, a strength that had been there all along, but had been buried beneath years of quiet sacrifice. Maggie was ready to reclaim her life, to live for herself, and to finally experience the freedom she had long deserved. Maggie had always been the one to give every day, every year. From the moment Samantha was born, she dedicated her life to her daughter, setting aside her own dreams to ensure Samantha had everything she needed to succeed. Maggie didn't just raise her. She poured herself into Samantha, sacrificing her career, her time, and her personal well-being to build a life for Samantha that would help her thrive. And yet, at this pivotal moment in their lives, just before Christmas, Maggie felt herself fading into the background of her own family, unseen and unappreciated. The holiday was meant to be a time for togetherness, warmth, and love, and Maggie had spent the entire day preparing for it. She woke up early, excited to cook Samantha's favorite meal, lemon herb roasted chicken with creamy mashed potatoes. The entire house smelled like the comforting, rich aroma of roasted garlic and thyme, and Maggie couldn't wait for Samantha to come home and enjoy the meal that had been made with so much love. She set the table, fluffed the pillows, and waited eagerly for Samantha's return. The air was filled with anticipation, but beneath that excitement was a quiet ache in Maggie's heart. Samantha had just finished her first full-time job after college and was working late into the evening. But Maggie couldn't help but hope her daughter would come home and notice the effort she'd put into making the evening special. When Samantha finally arrived, Maggie's hope quickly dissolved. Samantha didn't rush to greet her mother with a warm embrace. Instead, she immediately rushed into her father David's arms, proudly announcing that she had received a $5,000 bonus at work. Maggie stood by, feeling the sting of rejection as David beamed with pride at Samantha's success. The praise from David, as well as from his parents, Harold and Beverly, flowed freely, while Maggie remained in the background, feeling invisible. She had raised Samantha with so much care, and yet now, in this moment, it felt as though all of that had been forgotten. Trying to remain composed, Maggie stepped forward, offering to reheat the meal she had made, but Samantha barely acknowledged her. Instead, she became fixated on the pile of gifts she had brought for everyone, gifts for David, Harold, and Beverly, but nothing for Maggie. Maggie could feel the weight of the moment as Samantha handed out the gifts one by one, with no mention of Maggie at all. Finally, Samantha remembered, and she handed Maggie an envelope for the dog. The last envelope was for Coco, the family pet, and Maggie felt the sting of betrayal deep in her chest. When she asked, "What about mine?" Samantha responded with a cruel dismissal. She told Maggie, "Mom, you don't work. You cook and clean, sure, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" The words hit like a punch to the gut. Maggie had always been there for Samantha, pouring her love into her every day, making every sacrifice for her daughter's well-being. And yet, Samantha had turned those sacrifices into something worthless in her eyes. Maggie had spent years ensuring Samantha had everything she needed, but all Samantha saw was a mother who didn't earn a paycheck, someone who was invisible in the eyes of the world. Maggie stood there, stunned and heartbroken, as Samantha continued to dismiss her, treating her like a mere servant in the house, not a mother deserving of love and respect. The evening continued, with Samantha's pride in her own success on full display while Maggie stood by, silenced by the painful realization that she had been forgotten. When Maggie finally exploded in frustration, throwing the plate of cookies across the room in a fit of anger, the entire family turned on her. David and Beverly immediately began scolding her, accusing her of ruining the night. Maggie didn't care anymore. She had reached her breaking point. She was done being invisible, done sacrificing her life for a family that couldn't even see her for who she was. She stormed out of the house, leaving behind a family who had only ever seen her as a caretaker, never as a person with needs of her own. In the quiet solitude of a hotel room that night, Maggie began to realize something that had been gnawing at her for years. She had been living her life for everyone else. She had put aside her own dreams and needs for Samantha and David, but had never been enough. Samantha's rejection, combined with David's indifference, had finally shattered the illusion that her sacrifices were appreciated. For the first time in years, Maggie realized that she didn't have to live her life for anyone but herself. Maggie took a step toward her own freedom. She reached out to her mother, the one person who had always supported her without judgment, and she began to make the changes she had been too afraid to make. Maggie finally understood that she didn't need anyone's permission to live her life. She didn't need Samantha's approval or David's validation. She was done being the invisible woman behind the scenes. She was ready to be seen, to live her life on her own terms. And she wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Samantha, make her feel like she wasn't worthy of love and respect. In the days that followed, Maggie walked away from the toxic relationships that had kept her small for so long. She chose to embrace her independence, to rediscover the person she had once been before she had been consumed by her role as a mother and wife. She found new strength in herself, a strength that had been there all along but had been buried beneath years of quiet sacrifice. Maggie was ready to reclaim her life, to live for herself, and to finally experience the freedom she had long deserved. The story of Maggie teaches us a profound lesson about self-worth, boundaries, and the importance of recognizing our own value, especially in later years. For much of her life, Maggie gave endlessly to her family, putting their needs above her own, thinking that her love and sacrifice would be appreciated. But it wasn't until she felt invisible and unappreciated that she realized something crucial. Love and care must be mutual. We must not allow ourselves to become so absorbed in serving others that we forget to take care of ourselves, both emotionally and mentally. Maggie's decision to step away, to assert her needs, and to live for herself rather than for others is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your voice and your space. For seniors, this message is especially important as it is easy to slip into the background, feeling obligated to take care of others or to remain silent when our own needs are ignored. But Maggie shows us that setting boundaries, choosing self-respect, and embracing change are vital to finding peace and fulfillment. No matter our age, we deserve to be seen, heard, and loved in ways that honor who we are. Thank you for watching. We hope this video helped you reflect on the importance of setting boundaries and standing up for yourself, especially when it comes to family disrespect. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to Stories TH for more empowering content. Remember, you deserve love, respect, and happiness in all your relationships.